Hi, good evening, and welcome back to another session of Conversations with Dr. Lily. If you didn't know, I'm Dr. Lily, and I am a forensic victimologist, litigation consultant, researcher, and human behavior analyst. So today's topic of conversation is when love becomes survival, recognizing narcissistic and sociopathic patterns in relationships. And I will be talking about something that affects millions of people but is often misunderstood. And that is being in a relationship with someone who displays narcissistic or sociopathic traits. I want you to understand that this episode is not about diagnosing anybody, but it is about educating, bringing awareness, and helping people recognize unhealthy relationships and unhealthy relationship dynamics before they become emotionally, psychologically, financially, or physically destructive. So oftentimes survivors, when they leave relationships like these, they ask themselves questions like, was it really abuse? Why do I still miss them? And how did I not see the warning signs? The answer is often much more complicated than simply making bad choices or not seeing the red flags. Many of these relationships will follow predictable patterns that psychologists, victimologists, and trauma researchers have studied for decades. So I want to talk about some of them and also talk about my personal experience with being in a relationship like this. Let's first talk about what is narcissism. So a lot of people use the word narcissist to describe someone who is arrogant and self-centered. However, clinically, narcissistic personality characteristics involved way more than confidence. Some of the common traits is you probably heard me talk about before is that they have a grandiose sense of importance. They have a constant, insatiable need for admiration. They often feel entitled. They have severe difficulty accepting criticism. They exploit others for their own personal gain. They have very limited empathy. And they believe that they are unique or superior to everybody. But not everyone that has these traits has narcissistic personality disorder. So I want you to think of narcissism as a spectrum versus a hardcore black and white thing. So some people can have mild narcissistic tendencies and not be a narcissist, but others display patterns that become emotionally abusive. Those are the ones you need to look out for. So let's talk about sociopathic traits now. The term sociopath is not actually a diagnosis. Clinically, professionals will diagnose it as antisocial personality disorder. And people with antisocial traits may demonstrate chronic deceitfulness, manipulation, violate rules or laws. They're very impulsive, very aggressive, lack remorse, and they love exploiting others and show absolutely no guilt when they exploit them. But again, not everyone who displays these behaviors meets the diagnostic criteria, but being able to recognize the behavioral patterns can help people to protect themselves. So let's talk about some of the biggest differences between a narcissist and a sociopath. One of the questions I often hear is, what's the difference? Well, while there are often overlapping traits, many experts will distinguish them like this. A narcissistic individual wants admiration. They are not impulsive, and they won't do stuff that will tarnish their reputation, because that would be a severe hit to their ego. But a sociopathic person just wants control. A narcissistic partner will want you to constantly validate them every day, all the time. You have to tell them how great they look, how amazing they are, how just they light up the world every time. Just constantly pouring into them while you're being drained because they don't pour back. They just take. I often liken them to vampires. That's kind of what they come off as, because they're constantly sucking the life out of you and draining you to have that constant admiration. It is exhausting to be with somebody who has narcissistic traits. Again, the sociopathic partner will view relationships as opportunities to manipulate, dominate, or it just benefits them in some way. And for the longest, for those of you who don't know, I started doing this because I had gotten out of a relationship with someone who I highly believed was narcissistic. And I do believe they fall on the high, like the far end of being full, could be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. But then the more I was researching and going through things, I started to realize like there were some traits that didn't quite line up with the narcissist. And that's when I started to compare the sociopath and the narcissist to see. And my ex actually probably, again, sociopath is not a diagnosis. However, most people understand that more than they understand the antisocial personality disorder. So when I'm talking, you'll hear me just refer to them as sociopaths or something along that line. But when like I was saying, when I started doing more research and I'm analyzing some of the behavior patterns, I 100% believe he falls more in the sociopathic line than the narcissist, or it is a combination of the both of them. But what made me really think he falls more in the sociopathic line is that people are simply opportunities to manipulate, to benefit from. And so it really depends on how he's going to benefit from you, is how he will interact. If there's no benefit, he will not interact with you. And if you're a female dating him, what I talked about before in a video a while ago was that I really think he hates females, but he's not gay. He hates women. And it was a weird paradigm for me to think through that, because while he will sleep around with many different women, they are simply for his pleasure. They are just objects. The only benefit is pleasure for him. Other than that, or pleasure in having kids. Other than that, like, there's no real connection. It's always about what he can get from you. So yeah. Let's continue talking about the differences. So a narcissistic person may become enraged after criticism. That is 100% true. Their ego is so fragile that any perceived slight they will fly off the handle. And it could be something so minute that a normal person, let me not say normal, somebody who doesn't have these traits would probably be like, brush it off, whatever. But they will become enraged. And then a sociopathic individual may calmly manipulate circumstances without any obvious emotions, which is terrifying. Because if you're a person that likes to navigate things by reading and assessing people's emotions, you would have a very hard time with this, because they're very good at manipulating without, like I said, the obvious emotions. But understand that both relationships with either a narcissist or a sociopathic person can be very emotionally harmful. They both create chaotic trauma, but their motivations and emotional experiences are the only things that really differ. A lot of people wonder, how does somebody get into a relationship with somebody like this? But one of the biggest myths is that abusive relationships start with abuse. That's not the case at all whatsoever. I would venture to say that a good 99% don't start off as abusive. They actually start off as probably the most perfect relationship you've ever been in. Because they start off, they're very attentive, they're very loving, they're very affectionate, they're very present. And so it feels like it feels like a Disney fairy tale is what it starts off with, which is called love bombing. And you probably heard it before. People use it now in and out of context, but it's basically just being showered with gifts and affection, and that is really to draw you in. That's a manipulation tactic, to draw you in, to make you think that they're this great, amazing person. So the love bombing can include excessive compliments. They're constantly texting, constantly calling. They're very present right at the beginning. They have fast emotional intimacy, start talking about marriage and family early on in the relationship, and they call you their soulmate, and they make you feel uniquely understood, because what they're doing is fact gathering, data gathering, because all they're doing is gathering data on you and how to manipulate you. They're taking it to store it in the future so that they can turn whatever you say against you and use it as a means of tearing you down. Because of the intense emotion that love bombing has, it creates emotional bonding, or most people would know it as trauma bonding, is what it's doing. But after a period of the love bombing, things will start to change. They'll start criticizing you. They will start controlling. They will start tearing you down so that your confidence decreases. And they will start isolating you from your friends and your family. And before you know it, you'll find yourself questioning your own memory, your own judgment, and your own worth. Which leads me into gaslighting, which is one of the biggest tactics that is often used in these types of relationships. Gaslighting is one of the most psychologically damaging forms of emotional abuse, because it has you literally thinking you're going insane. You question reality. You can't tell what's fact, what's fiction, what they made up, what is something you thought up, even if it's something that you know that you know that you know that you know. Like, you know that the sky is blue. That's a simple example. The sky is blue, right? But when they gaslight you, they'll be like, no, the sky is orange or purple. And after so many times of being told, no, you're crazy, the sky is purple, how are you seeing it blue? Like, what is wrong with you? You're imagining things. The sky is purple. After a while, not even after a while, but after so many times, you start to question, like, okay, could the sky maybe be purple? Or I think I see some purple in the sky, or maybe I'm colorblind. Maybe I'm just not seeing things right. And guess what? By the time you've gotten to this point in the relationship, you probably don't have a good support system. You probably have pushed away your friends who've told you, like, hey, this is not a good relationship. You should probably get out. Your family has probably been pushed away, so you don't really have anybody to validate what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're going through, because there's nobody really there. Or if they are there, the person has been so charming to the outside that nobody's going to believe what you're saying, because this person is amazing. Like, they're just such a great person. So nobody's going to believe what you're going through in your relationship. It's a crazy world to be in. But some of the gaslighting things, examples would be, I never said that. You're being too sensitive. Or you're imagining things. You gotta be crazy. You're so crazy. Why are you crazy? Or that never happened. Even when you could literally catch them in the act of doing something and they will still be like, it never happened. It's like that Shaggy song, it wasn't me. That is classic gaslighting. He was gaslighting people way back when. But yes, that is gaslighting. So eventually, when you've been gaslit so much, victims will begin to question themselves and their memory. They'll question themselves more than they question the person who's gaslighting them, which is a crazy paradigm. But research has shown that prolonged emotional abuse can produce symptoms similar to trauma responses, because you're in a traumatic situation. So you'll be hypervigilant, anxious, feel depressed, have sleep disturbances, difficulty concentrating, have low self-esteem, and emotional numbness. So then most people would say, why would somebody stay? That's a great question. And it's probably the most misunderstood question, because most people would be like, why didn't you just leave? It's not that hard, right? If you don't like something, you just leave, right? Yeah, it's not that easy. There's a lot that goes into it. So the better question that you should ask is, what happened that made it so difficult to leave? Because several factors may contribute. There's the trauma bonding that we talked about at the beginning. There's fear and intimidation, because they've probably, more than likely, done something to make you fearful. You could be financially dependent on them because they stopped allowing you to go to work, or they take all of your money, and you don't have any resources to yourself. Or you have children with them and you want to try to work it out for the children's sake, or religious beliefs. And this is a topic I want to talk about on a future session, because I think a lot of religious beliefs are a lot of reasons why people, let me rephrase this. I think some religious beliefs are reasons why people will stay in a relationship when they need to get out. That is personal opinion, but I'll do some research on it, and when I have that discussion or that session, I'll let you know what I find. And then there's isolation. Like I said, if you don't have a support system, it makes it extremely hard, because you don't have anybody to help you. Part of that could be because you stopped answering the phone. You stopped hanging out because your partner always would get mad at you being on the phone or laughing or hanging out with your friends, even though it was something you did before this person became a significant part of your life. And even at the beginning, this was a normal activity for you, but slowly but surely, they started isolating you from your friends and family. And it could be simple things like just being like, oh, I never liked that friend. I never liked her. She's always loud. She's this and that, blah, blah, blah. Or, just doing things to put doubt in your mind about people you've known longer than you've known this person. And then there's always that hope that the person will change. And I'll talk about this later on in the video, but if you're somebody that sees the good in somebody else, almost no matter what, this is going to be a really hard situation for you to get out of. And I say that because you're always trying to see or make an excuse of well, maybe they just had a bad day. Maybe they had a rough day at work. Maybe, it's just, maybe they're hungry. They were hangry. No, they did it on purpose. They do it on purpose because they want you to be under their control, because you are their lifeblood. They need you for their own personal gain. And then there's the repeated cycles of abuse followed by affection. That is what makes it even harder, because there will be times where the abuse isn't always abuse, because it'll feel like affection. So they'll manipulate your emotions. They will be affectionate for a period of time. It'll feel like it was how it was when you first met. And then the abuse will start all over again. So in my case, my ex we'd be really good, and then just randomly out the blue, he'd ghost me and just disappear for days. No communication, no hey, I need some time to myself, nothing. It was just absolutely nothing. And so I would constantly be trying to figure out did I say something? Did I do something? And it was just constantly questioning, what did I do that he just started ghosting me? And then by the time I made up my mind, I'm like, okay, well, I guess things are over. He'd pop back up and start all over with the affection and buying gifts and being super sweet and being present as if nothing had happened. And then I'd be confused because it was never addressed. I'd be like, what happened? We never discussed why you just up and left and didn't talk to me for days on end and ignored all my calls and text messages and had no idea what was going on. And it'd be a pattern every time I got tired and be like, okay, I'm ready to leave this situation. He'd come back with the love and affection, and it was just that constant. So it keeps you constantly questioning it's not so bad. Maybe they didn't mean to. Maybe I shouldn't have said this. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. It's not you, it's them. And the reason they do these cycles of abuse followed by affection, followed by abuse, followed by affection is because they are strengthening the emotional attachment. They are strengthening the trauma bond. That is their sole purpose. They manipulate you for their own personal gain. And because you're in this constant cycle and trauma bonded, your brain starts to associate relief with the very person causing the distress. And this is a weird feeling because you're like, okay, this person is the one that continues to ghost me and continues to harm me. But then they come back and they're really sweet and they're really nice to me. So your brain is like, they are the relief and they are the harm at the same exact time. It is a crazy world to be in. So that is why leaving isn't simply just a decision. It's often a recovery process. And it's not a quick and easy process. It is so difficult. And if you haven't experienced this or had to deal with this, it won't make sense. It's just one of those things where if you've never been in it, if you've never dealt with it, it seems like the person is crazy for staying in a situation that they can't stand, but you can't leave. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. And I know when I was doing counseling and I would have clients that were in abusive relationships, and I'd be like, just leave. It's not that hard, right? You don't enjoy getting beat down, right? No, they didn't enjoy having their face messed up or bruises all over their body. But they wouldn't leave, and I could not for the life of me understand, because I'm like, just pack your stuff and go somewhere and never look back. And then I wound up in an abusive relationship, and it made me understand it's not as simple as just packing up and leaving. And even when I was doing the counseling and I was in an abusive relationship, it was psychologically and emotionally abusive. But what's crazy is, like, I was counseling other people on relationships, other couples on healthy relationships, and being in a seriously unhealthy relationship. And it's like, and deep down I knew, but I didn't feel like I could leave. And there was always that hope that things would change or things would go back to what they used to be. So that made it harder. And it also, like, I was so good at helping other people with their relationships and terrible with my own. But a lot of it had to do with, I'm a hopeful person. I try to see the good in other people all the time, which can be a blessing and a curse. Which also was one of the reasons that made me so vulnerable to this type of relationship. But I do want to point out that anyone can become involved in an abusive relationship. It doesn't matter socioeconomic status, it doesn't matter race, it doesn't matter intelligence. Anybody can become involved in an abusive relationship. But I do want to point out there are some circumstances that may increase the vulnerability, which, as you'll see, I fit like almost every category. But typically the circumstances that can increase vulnerability are people who are highly empathetic. I'm one of them. If you grew up in a chaotic household, chaos is normal for you. And people who love to manipulate love chaos. You have prior trauma, which I feel like a lot of us do. And you naturally see the good in others. You have difficulty setting boundaries. Or you feel responsible for fixing people. Oh my goodness. That is a downfall for me. Because I can often see the good in someone despite what they've done. And then there's a part of me, if I am with someone, I feel responsible for helping them get better. So I'm very cautious about now that I'm out of that relationship, I've been very cautious about asking myself, and I also have a friend who also asked if I know when I am trying to fix somebody. So good self-reflection. But I do want to point out that being targeted is not a sign of weakness. It is because manipulative individuals manipulate. That's what they do. They've been doing it probably their entire life. And they are expert level, beyond expert at manipulating people. And they will seek out people who are compassionate, forgiving, and trustworthy, loyal people. Because, well, this is my opinion. I think some of them do it because they don't have those traits and they want them. I've often said that narcissists are like vampires and sociopaths because they suck the life out of you. They drain you. And I think it's because they see in you what they don't have and they want it, so they acquire it by taking over. I know this sounds crazy, but it sounds like a sci-fi movie, which is really what I think of, like the Body Snatchers, or shows like that, or like the vampire shows where they're trying to be normal, or werewolves and they're trying to be normal and not drink human blood, but that desire, that whatever takes over them and they have to feed. That's the best way I can put it. Like narcissists and sociopaths have to feed on compassionate, forgiving, loyal, and trustworthy people. That is, yeah. I hope this makes sense to somebody. But understand, these are still strengths and they're not flaws. You're not a flawed person because you're compassionate, forgiving, loyal, or trustworthy. It's just that the vampire wants to take over. But let's talk about some of the warning signs. Look out if things are moving too fast, like whirlwind fast, like Disney princess fast. If they never accept responsibility, all of their former partners are crazy. That's a huge sign. They isolate you from your friends and your family. They monitor your phone or your finances, or they criticize you but expect you to admire them and appreciate them. They become angry if you try to establish boundaries, and they will do everything to cross those boundaries. And you constantly feel like you're walking on eggshells. So healthy relationships should make you feel emotionally safe. When you're in an unhealthy relationship, you will feel emotionally confused. You will be in a state of constant confusion because that is how they keep you stuck. There is so much that I could go on with, like just my own personal experience, because it was such a weird thing for me to get into, and I often question how and why. But the person I am today versus the person I was even 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago is way different. But the person I am today is because of what I went through. I could say it was because of the near-death experience. But even still, after almost dying at his hands, there was a time where I would make excuses as to why it happened within myself. And I would try to rationalize or justify why it happened, even when he clearly, intentionally was trying to kill me. Like there was no second guessing. It was an accident. It was 100% the man was trying to kill me and told me that he was going to kill me and bury me in the woods. So there was no mistaking the intent. But after it, I think a lot of it had to do with, because I was so shocked that it happened. I think I was just trying to find something normal to like reorient myself to. And I kept trying to go back to like how things used to be, but would never ever be. And at the time, I'm a reservist, so I only do my military job once a month. But during that time, I was on full-time orders. And so I had taken leave and went on this trip. And I have to say that if I was not on orders and had to show up for work, because after we got back from the trip, I still had to wear sunglasses because the veins in my eyes were still bloodshot. You could still see the strangulation marks on my neck. I still had bruises on my face. Even putting makeup on couldn't cover the bruising. I couldn't move my arm very well. And I can't wear sunglasses in uniform, right? So when I got back to work, I had no choice but to report, because you could tell something happened. It wasn't something I could hide. And I think that actually was one of the reasons that I was able to get distance to be able to like heal and move away, along with having an indefinite no contact order that I never ever plan on removing. But there are still times, probably within the first year, that I would go back in my mind and be like, maybe, just maybe he didn't mean to. Like, that's dumb to think like that, because like I said, he clearly meant to do it. I feel like he planned it out beforehand. So it's like, it doesn't make sense to make excuses. But because of the years of conditioning, the years of being in that trauma bond and the love cycle, love bombing, abuse, affection cycle, you're not thinking rationally. And you really, really need your support system to be able to get out of the situation. There's no way around it. You have to have a good support system. And this is for both men and women. Like, I think a lot of people don't think that men can be in relationships with narcissistic females or sociopathic females, or it's not as common. But yeah, it goes for both men and women. You need to have a good support system in order to leave. And that sounds like gloom and doom, but I just don't think it's possible to leave on your own. I could be wrong though. I would hope that if you are alone, that you are able to leave. And I hope that if today's session resonated with you, I do want you to know that healing is possible. It takes a long time. I'm still healing. I still have flashbacks. I still have nightmares. I still don't sleep right. Every time I hear a certain vehicle, I low-key panic every time. Internally, I am panicking. Even when I know that it's not that person, I still panic. Recovery takes time. It is possible, but it takes time. And again, having a good support system is really what you need. And also educating yourself on what healthy and unhealthy patterns look like. I hope that you learned something about healthy and unhealthy relationships. And I want you to understand that whether the behavior stems from narcissistic traits, sociopathic traits, trauma, or something else entirely, abuse is defined by the impact it has on the victim, not by the diagnosis of the person causing it. And a healthy relationship is built on respect, honesty, empathy, accountability, and emotional safety. So if you don't feel emotional safe, take a deep look and really assess if this is a situation you need to be in or not. So I appreciate you for joining me today. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it, like it. If you think somebody is in need of it, pass this on to them. And if you're in a relationship that you are struggling to get out of and you don't have a support system, you can always contact me. I don't need to know the ins and outs, but I can be here for you as a support system and as an accountability partner, as whatever you need in the moment, without judgment, because I have been in your shoes, so I know what it's like, and I would not judge you for that. If you are an immigrant who is experiencing psychological and emotional abuse and you're trying to get your citizenship through the Violence Against Women Act and you need a report, I'm the one. I will write it for you so that you can submit it into your case to get your citizenship without your abuser knowing. So you can reach out to me. My email is riseconsultingllc@outlook.com, or you can go on to my website, and that is riseconsultingservices.org, O-R-G, and just send me a message. I will respond. I will help you in any way that I can. So until next time, please stay informed, do your research, read the book called It's Not You. I can never say her name. Starts with an R. I will find it and put a link to it. That book is really good to read on what like narcissist relationships look like, and that can be from having a parent who is narcissist to being in a relationship with a narcissist. So remember that awareness is one of the strongest forms of protection. So stay safe and have a blessed evening. Thank you.